Hello, everybody. Mike from Southern California again, and you're on the mic. On today's episode, I want to talk about the art of professional wrestling management. Um, you know, going off under another little niche topic, pro wrestling, and just talk a little bit about you know the manager's role in a professional. Now, in today's world of professional wrestling, you really don't have a lot. Like in the WWF, you do or WWE, you do see like Paul Heyman and Zeb Coulter, but for the most part, the role of the manager has somewhat gone away because of just how everything is today. So traditionally, what does it mean to be a to be a manager in pro wrestling? I'm going to talk about that and some of the elements in it historically, going back to like, all the way back to the 70s and stuff like that. Basically throughout the 70s and 80s and even in the early 90s, managers have you know have have had many roles when it comes to representing their clients. Um, from the three wise men of the East in the old, starting out with the old WWF during WWE's golden age, when you're talking about like the guys like Captain Lou Albano, the Grand Wizard Ernie Roth, and Classy Freddie Blassie, as well as Arnold Scotland, who the Golden Boy led um, who led Bruno Sammartino and Bob Backlund to a grand total, two for Sammartino and one for Backlund, world, WWF and then later WWF World Heavyweight title. Um, Going down, in the southeast, but guys like Homo Dell, you get up into like you start getting up into like you go down to Florida, you get Sir Oliver Humperdinck. Go up into Tennessee, you get Sam Bass, Jimmy Dykes, or Jimmy Kent rather. I'm sorry. Um, Go up into Detroit, you see George Cannon and Eddie Creechman. Also in the Midwest area there in AWA and where like Bobby Heenan started off there. You know, many long and of course in the south, in the mid south area where you have Gary Hart and Skanvar Akbar, where you've had a number of guys. Wrestling managers come from all types of background, and they had to play on and they had to call on a bunch of different specialties because what are the roles of a pro wrestling manager? Well, probably the most basic one of all is obviously managing their clients' business affairs, business representation. This comes into play in things like managing helping their clients to manage their money, scheduling appearances, um, representing their clients in contract negotiations. That the business side of it is probably the core of what the pro wrestling manager does. Obviously, pro wrestling manager represents their client in all aspects, but that's probably the one that is most well known. It's usually the business aspect. You know, Usually to take a particular cut of their clients' money, and many times, of course, many managers come up with they'll manage many wrestlers and form stables. Bobby Heenan's first Bobby Heenan and Jimmy Hart at points in their career had stables they called the First Family. Um, J.J. Dillon in the NWA with the Four Horsemen in the '80s. You know, But even if they never had fancy names, a lot of managers would have stable wrestlers, a stable of wrestlers. They'd have at least one guy to go after, let's say the major singles title, and another guy to go after. So they'd have all that money coming in. So, again, representing them in the business affairs. Obviously, another thing in their representation is representing them, helping to represent them personally. Oftentimes, you see many wrestling managers at ringside. There's a couple roles that they do from ringside, particularly like one of the big things, particularly back in the '70s, that managers would do a lot of times, as we were getting more into what wrestling being on TV and stuff, is that in a way the managers would represent their clients on the mic. Back in those days, wrestling was more dependent upon what you did in the ring. You know, back then, if let's say you had a hour long TV show, right? You had a six, most wrestling shows throughout are at the very least an hour, you know, and of course the majority of it was usually like 40-20 or 45-15, where was action to talk. But nowadays it's more the other way. It's more like 40 to 45 minutes of talking and only 15 to 20 minutes of action. You know, yeah, 3-to-1 ratio. Back in those days, a 3-to-1 ratio in the action column, but nowadays it's more 3-to-1 ratio in the talk column. Being on the mic. So back then, there were some wrestlers, like for example, when Captain Lou Albano would manage the Wild Samoans, when they came to WWF, were tag team champions. Now, at this point in time, of course, Samoans were depicted as being very primal, almost incapable of actual speech or having a conversation like maybe you and I would have. They're like looked at as basically being primitive individuals, who just, went in the woods all day and cracked coconuts over their heads, for the fun of it. Often talk about how Samoans have hard heads and all that. A lot of times they were big guys, but they weren't very verbal a lot of times. So Captain Lou Albano, as a number of wrestling managers would do, would represent their guy on the mic. If the guy they were representing was not strong on the mic, a manager would sit there and basically be their mouthpiece. And of course, Captain Lou Albano was considered one of the great talkers of his time. Bobby Heenan was another one who was, a great talker of his time. You know, um, Now granted, again, with most managers, they have, there's a mix of many managers were at one point professional wrestlers in their career, and some of them even had significant success as wrestlers. We look at Harley Race. Harley Race probably considered one, who died earlier this year. You know, he was probably considered probably considered the man of his time in the late '70s. He was like, I think, an 8-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. He had some legendary matchups with the likes of, you know, Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe, Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk, um, and lastly with Ric Flair before going to. And then after his in-ring career came to an end, he eventually did come back and start to had a very good run as a manager with with um with Vader, which he would kind of represent Vader, you know. And he'd go now. One of the other things that managers also, many of them, as I said, drew upon their many of them who actually were wrestlers before they became managers would of course be able to draw upon their wrestling experience in like talking to their clients about like things like in ring strategy, knowing just when to get the referee's distraction, just the right time to distract the referee about something, so that their their client could either sit there and get the upper hand on the opponent with some underhanded tactic, or give their client a breather. Um, so having that in ring experience as well that many of those managers would have also helped in their managing of their clients, because in terms of understanding things like pacing, terms of, okay, well, what do we want to do with this guy, his opponent, strategy, you know, learning how to take opportunities in the ring. That also all plays into being a professional wrestling manager. Um, so yeah, so the primary assets to part of professional wrestling management are the business aspect of it, business representation, ringside representation in terms of stratagem, and sometimes even being a mouthpiece for them. So managers wear many different hats, and some managers have even gone on to become like Paul Heyman, who was a pretty successful manager in his own right. Went on ran his own company for a few years. Um, Granted, I think a lot of times he tried to push things a little further than he could, but that was that. But yeah, so that's at least what I want to talk about with that. So moving on then from that, because I think I said as much as I can about that particular topic. Let's look at this day in history, in Nietzsche history. So, on this date in 1969, the late Joanie Laurer, better known as Chyna, was born on this date in 1969. She would have turned 50 today. We unfortunately lost her in back in 2016 at the age of 46, when she died due to an apparent accidental overdose. But on this date, 1969, Joanie Laurer was born into this world, the late Joanie Laurer. So, anyways, moving on then. On this date in 1985, Don Don Cougar, a Japanese super robot anime television series produced by Ashi Productions, would finish its run on this date in 1985. Ran for 38 episodes and was followed by 4 OVAs. So on this date in 1985, Don Cougar, a super robot anime, would finish its run on would finish its broadcast run, its initial broadcast run. So, and also on this date in 2005, the Ben 10 franchise was born on this date in 2005. With the first episode, of course, of the first Ben 10 series, this would eventually lead to the franchise that have come out with many different titles. So this was the first episode of the Ben 10 series of the Ben 10 franchise. Came out on this date in 2005. So with that all being said, with all that being said, if you guys want to contact me directly, you can check out my Discord. You can join if you'd like. I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. Um, you can also direct message me there, as well as comment on the videos. Um, also, let's see. You can also check out the other links in there. I'm promoting a bunch of different dub companies. As you all know, Funimation is not the only game in town. Um, Also, I'm still promoting, of course, the GoFundMe's, Vic's GoFundMe. As always, guys, never feel like you have to donate. It's on your heart to do so, and you have the means to do. If you have the means to do so, it's on your heart to do so. Please consider donating. If you've already donated, please consider donating again. And if you cannot donate, you can still help out the cause by sharing the link. After all, sharing is caring, and you never know. Maybe there's somebody in your circle of friends who might see it and go, "Yeah, you know something, I want to help out too." You never know. Doesn't hurt to ask. And if you like this content, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Um, Hit the notification bell so you guys can get the updates right away. As you all know, I will usually reply back to comments pretty quickly. As long as, of course, it's civil and respectful. You know, so, so yeah. So with that, I hope to see you guys at the premiere tonight of Voices Big and Small, Andy McGavin. If not, then I will see you on Monday. Bye.